Hey guys, this is Leon here. In this video, I want to talk about that feeling you may be getting that your life is going around in circles and is not getting anywhere. And life appears to be going in cycles, that there's times where you're improving and you're getting into a deeper level of insight and self-understanding. Your outer life is showing progress, but then it seems like your life is backtracking and you're finding yourself in a very difficult emotional space. So this video is about how you get a deep perspective on these cycles so that you can find inner peace and calm. And so it doesn't feel like you're always just going back to square one again. So just to let you know, it's helpful for me if you could like these videos, if you find them to be helpful, and let's get started. So what people find really helpful when it comes to these cycles is to be able to take a step back away from them and to look at them from a bird's eye perspective, to have a bit of distance from them. Because in our day-to-day affairs, we're so involved in our activities or in our emotional state or in our thoughts that it almost seems like our cycles are happening to us. So this is a way to get that distance from the cycles and to be able to observe them and be curious and non-judgmental towards your cycles. And when you look at these cycles, you notice that there's these times when you are in these lows and it can feel like your emotions are really difficult and your thoughts are really challenging and negative. And your actions are completely paralyzed. You don't know what to do, and you really want to get out of this state. And then there's these other times in your life when you're at these highs. And when you're at these highs, it can feel really good. You have a sense of inner peace. You're connected to your sense of purpose, and you have a stronger intuition about what your higher self is like during this state. And there's other times in your life where you feel like you're in between. And this is when we're meeting the obligations that we have that are put upon ourselves. We're spending our time trying to make things work, trying to figure things out in our life, in our day-to-day affairs. And it can feel like it's a lot of pressure to be in this state. And when you start to look at things this way, you start to realize you're not in any of these states permanently. You're always cycling through from one state to another. So I have this incredible diagram by Dr. Darinardi that helps illustrate this concept that I was just talking about very concisely. And you could see that there are 3 stages of human development, of personal growth, according to this diagram, much like the stages I was just talking about. And at the very bottom of this diagram is being in the dark grip. That is the one that corresponds when we're at our low. And you can see that Dr. Darinardi says there's actually a task to be done. There's a task to be done at this level, and that is healing. When we could be able to enter into our deep difficult emotions and allow ourselves to process them while taking a step back away from things. So to us, it seems like we're being paralyzed, right? But there's a purpose to being in this state. It allows us to do this emotional processing. And of course, there is the negative and the limitations of being in this state. As you can see here, it says, in this state, you're in constant fight and flight and freeze mode, and you're in a grip of tunnel vision. So there's 2 sides to the story of this stage, but this stage does serve its purpose. And this next stage here is the culturally adapted stage. That corresponds to the one I said that's in the middle. And there's a task here, there's a purpose here, and that is in achievement. And having roles to play in society and obligations to fulfill, that's not always a negative thing. There's also a positive aspect to it too. It allows you to be able to have that sense of achievement. Yet there's also a negative side to this state as well. This is when we are guarded and we can be triggered by key issues, and the mind is caught up in group narratives and is keyed into social survival. So when we're in this state, we may not feel like we're our whole entire selves, because that's where the next stage here comes in. And it takes a lot of our forebrain to be able to be in the state, to be in that state of constantly trying to figure things out. At the very top of this diagram is whole with joy, and that's where we are in a state of transcendence. And being in a state is not necessarily some sort of woo-woo kind of state. This is when we have philosophical understanding of our life. And there's also brain research that shows that people do reach this kind of state of mind where they're tuned into their intuition and to their own insight. So here the focus is transcendence, and this is when we're resilient, we'll be able to process challenges in our lives in a healthy way. We're highly present, but we're not drawn and we're not grasping. So that diagram may look like models of personal growth that you have seen before, but Dr. Dario Nardi has a twist on it. He says it's actually healthy to cycle through the different cycles. So in traditional models, what happens is that you go from one stage to the next and to the final one in a very linear kind of way, as if reaching transcendence is the destination. However, Dr. Nardi is more in tune with the process of it. In this model, you're going through these different cycles, you're going through the different stages, but it's actually healthy to go from one stage to the other, to the next, and then back to the first stage again. So I want to go into more depth as to what are the advantages to each of these stages. There are actually advantages to being in the dark grip. When you're in the dark grip, when you're in your shadow, that is when you sink into your emotions, no matter how difficult they are. And when you do that, you get to have a better understanding of what your needs and what your values are. Because when your emotions are triggered, they are really touching upon something that you stand for deep within yourself. So this is a way for you to be able to get to know who you are at a deeper level. When we are stuck in the culturally adapted stage, it does not allow for that. In that culturally adapted stage, we're trying to meet our obligations all the time and adapt to society and meet our day-to-day affairs. But when we can't release ourselves from that and allow ourselves to sink into our emotions, we start to find that it's actually hard to really know who we are. Even though at this level, we're applying our rationality, we're applying our forebrain, it doesn't seem to really get to the depth of who we are. So there's another advantage of being in dark grip, and it is this. The stages don't necessarily go in order. It doesn't go from necessarily from being in dark grip to being culturally adaptive to being transcendent. Actually, there are times when we go from being in dark grip, and that allows us to launch ourselves to a transcendent stage. Because when we can sink into our emotions, get to an understanding about our needs, and know ourselves at a deep level, that could allow for that higher level of understanding that's found in transcendence. When we are stuck in the culturally adapted stage for too long, what happens is that we may feel there's something missing in our lives, like there's more to life than this, what society is expecting from me, but we're not uncomfortable enough to make changes in our lives. But when we allow ourselves to sink in to that bottom state, then it could help us. And there are cases of people they have found where when they're recovering from depression, in that state of recovery, there's parts of the brain that light up that are akin to the transcendent stage here. There are advantages to being in the culturally adaptive stage over the transcendence stage. And what that is that the culturally adapted stage allows you to be more relatable to others. It allows you to serve people in concrete ways, even though these ways are limited by the roles of society that gives to us. There's actually a purpose to building a persona. So a persona is a personality you create in order to relate and adapt to the people around you and in the roles that you play. It gets a really bad rap, but I think the problem with the persona is if people mistake their persona for themselves and they don't develop other aspects of their personality at any deep level. The disadvantage of the transcendence stage is that in this stage, our minds and our thoughts and ideals are so abstract, it may be hard to communicate with others and to help us serve others in concrete ways. There are advantages to the transcendence stage. So some people poo-poo that stage and they kind of ignore it, and their goal is to be culturally adaptive. But Carl Jung has said something to say about this. So this is a quote from him. He said, "I have frequently seen people become neurotic when they content themselves with inadequate or wrong answers to the questions of life. They seek position, marriage, reputation, outward success, or money, and remain unhappy and neurotic even when they have attained what they were seeking. Such people are usually confined within too narrow a spiritual horizon. Their life has not sufficient content, sufficient meaning. If they are unable to develop into more spacious personalities, the neurosis generally disappears." So when you're going through these cycles in life, it may not feel like you're getting anywhere and that there's no progress. But there's progress that is being made, but it's at a deeper level. It's coming from a greater understanding of and perspective that your life is going through these cycles and more conscious awareness each time you enter into these stages. So initially when you go through the stages, you're kind of doing so unconsciously, but the more and more you go through it, the more and more you are consciously aware of the purpose and validity of each of these stages, and that each of these stages have their time and place. This knowledge cannot really be understood at an intellectual level. It comes from having experienced the cycles of life over and over again. That allows us to have a sense of it at a deeper level, what the lessons of it are. So when we can step back and we can see the purpose of all of these stages and that they have their time and place, it allows us to have a greater sense of inner integration within ourselves. And being able to tune into the process of going through the stages without having to force ourselves to be in this stage or to get out of that stage, that is a lifelong journey. When you are in a stage and you want to get out of it, try not to think about it in terms of right and wrong. It's right that I'm in this stage, or it's wrong I'm in that stage. Think about it more in terms of tuning into your intuition and into the process, and also experimenting with the stages. To say that you're in one stage for a while and you say, I want to switch over to another stage. Do that as more from an experimental and curious kind of mindset rather than a right and wrong kind of mindset. I want to thank Dr. Darnardi for inspiring this idea after I had a really deep discussion with him. So I'm going to have a link to his new book down below in the description. Be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for watching.